They're live for us in Jerusalem. Eritrea's president says history is being made on his first visit to neighbouring Ethiopia in more than 2 decades. Isaias Afewerki received a warm welcome to the capital by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. It's the latest step towards reconciliation and peace between the long-time rivals. Last weekend, the leaders signed a pact to restore diplomatic and trade ties, bringing an end to a 20-year military standoff. Well, Eritrea split from Ethiopia in 1993 after a long battle for independence, but they fought another brutal border war just 5 years later. It began in 1998 near the frontier town of Badme, a disputed area under Ethiopia's control. Around 70,000 people were killed and tens of thousands displaced. Fighting along the 1,000-kilometre border only ended in December 2000 with the signing of the Algiers Agreement. A border commission was set up as part of that peace deal. In 2002, a UN-backed ruling granted contested territories to Eritrea, including Badme. But Ethiopia refused to withdraw its troops. That was until Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in April this year. He has since agreed to fully accept the terms of the Algiers Agreement and normalise relations. Mohammed Adao has more from Addis Ababa.
There is a general sense of excitement here and hope that Eritrea and Ethiopia could be inching closer to lasting peace. And there is a lot of excitement about President Isaias Afewerki's visit, the first time he has done so in 20 years, not such a short time, because Ethiopia is also the seat of the African Union, and Isaias had refused to attend all those African Union summits that were held in Addis Ababa during the period of conflict. Now, this excitement and hope partly explains the jubilant mood with which he was welcomed at the airport. Tens of thousands lining up the streets between the airport and the Prime Minister's palace, where he had a meeting with the Prime Minister. The highlight of Isaias Afewerki's visit is on Sunday, when he's going to reopen the embassy, which the Eritrean embassy in Addis Ababa, which has been closed for 20 years.
Let's get more on this. Vanessa Berra is an Eritrean human rights activist and founder of One Day Sayum, an organisation that works for the release of people who've been unjustly imprisoned in Eritrea. Thanks very much for talking about this with us. First of all, there's a lot of optimism, a lot of excitement even, about this friendship now that's being formed between the two leaders. Are you optimistic things are really going to change in Eritrea?
If you look at the situation in Eritrea, you see that everything that's happened since the end of the war in 2000 has been justified by this war. The unjust imprisonment of several journalists, politicians, dissident voices, the creation of the National Service Program that lasts indefinitely, the fact that the Constitution hasn't been implemented has all been done in the name of this war. So the fact that the war now is over is, of course, good news, because that means that the excuse that the Eritrean government has used for the repression is gone. But that does not necessarily mean that the repression will end.
You touch on journalists there, and I understand your uncle has been locked up for quite some time. Just tell me a little bit about why he was locked up.
So the first elections in Eritrea were supposed to happen in 2001, and there was a general discourse in the Eritrean community that discussing why is nothing happening about this election. There were no preparations being made. There were more and more oppressive politics being implemented, and several people who were criticizing the government were eventually imprisoned. My uncle was one of them. He was 1 out of 10 journalists. But there was also a group of politicians from within the government that have been internally and then eventually externally criticizing the government and the president. And they're all eventually imprisoned a week after 9/11, when the entire world was watching 9/11 in New York. The Eritrean government decided to turn the country into a dictatorship. And that was the circumstances of my uncle's arrest and the creation of the Eritrean dictatorship.
Do you now think, or do you have confidence that the government will recognise that people like your uncle, human rights activists, even opposition politicians, should be now released?
If you look at what's happened with the peace deal, there hasn't been a single mention of the human rights abuses that have been happening in the name of this war. Even Dr. Abiy's comments and remarks about Isaias Afewerki has been very romanticizing. And there's been a kind of neglect of the human cost of this war on the Eritrean side of it. The Eritrean people have been suffering immensely for the past 17 years in the name of a war that has not been proportionate to the effects that they have been having on the people. the fact that there's been a standoff on the border cannot justify the fact that people have been unjustly imprisoned for 17 years, that young people are forced to work for a national service almost for free indefinitely. It is completely disproportionate, and this hasn't been addressed, neither by the Ethiopian Prime Minister, nor by the Eritrean President. So I am obviously happy about this peace deal because it's such a big change in the Eritrean politics. Nothing has happened for the past 17 years. But I'm not optimistic because no one has even addressed these very, very crucial issues.
If you could say something to both leaders at the moment, if they were sort of watching right now, what was it the priority should be now for them as they establish this friendship and hopefully an end to hostilities for a long time?
I would, first of all, turn to my own president or to the leader of my country and urge him to implement the Constitution, first of all, implement the rule of law, release the prisoners, give them a fair trial, and then release the youth of our people. They deserve to live a free and dignified life in our country, and he cannot continue to use the war as a justification or any kind of justification for that anymore.
Let's hope he's watching. Vanessa Vera, thanks very much for joining us.